In the pre-dawn hours of October 25, 1944, a deceptive calm settled over the waters east of Samar Island in the Philippines. For the man of the U.S. Navy's Task Unit 77.4.3, a small flotilla codenamed Taffy 3, the greatest threat seemed to have passed. They were a light screening force, a collection of small, slow escort carriers and a handful of destroyers and even smaller destroyer escorts, designed to hunt submarines and support ground troops, not to fight a naval fleet. The previous day, American carrier aircraft had savaged the Japanese center force in the Sibuyan Sea, sinking the super battleship Musashi and forcing the enemy into what appeared to be a full retreat. The sailors of Taffy 3 believed their primary duty was now to fend off land-based aircraft while the main battle was fought elsewhere. They were tragically mistaken. Out of the morning mist and rain squalls, lookouts made a terrifying sighting: the unmistakable pagoda-style masts of a massive Japanese fleet bearing down on them. This was no remnant force. This was Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, which had reversed course during the night and slipped through the San Bernardino Strait undetected. At its heart was the largest, most powerful battleship ever sent to sea, the Yamato. The Americans were caught completely by surprise, sailing directly into the jaws of a predator they thought was slain. The mismatch of forces was staggering, a statistical absurdity. Aboard the Yamato, Admiral Kurita commanded 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. Against this armada stood Taffy 3's 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. The battleship Yamato alone, at a full load of over 72,000 tons, displaced more than the entire American task unit combined. The American ships were armed with 5-inch guns, whose shells would bounce harmlessly off the thick hide of a battleship, while the Japanese brought colossal 18.1-inch cannons to the fight, weapons designed to obliterate fleets from over the horizon. From the bridge of his flagship, Yamato, Admiral Kurita peered through his binoculars and made a fatal misidentification. He mistook the small, slow jeep carriers for the formidable fleet carriers of Admiral Halsey's main Third Fleet. Believing he had, by a stroke of fortune, ambushed the core of American naval power in the Pacific, he gave the order for general attack, a command that unleashed his ships in a chaotic, disorganized charge, breaking their battle line, but launching them headlong toward the terrified Americans. At 0699, the horizon erupted in fire. From a range of over 19 miles, or 34,500 yards, the 9 18.1-inch guns of the Yamato opened fire. The sound was not a simple boom, but a deafening crack, like the tearing of immense silk fabric, followed by a thunderous roar that rolled across the waves. The blast wave from a full broadside was a weapon in itself, a concussive force so powerful it was known to kill or maim any exposed crewman on the battleship's own deck. For the American sailors, it was a spectacle of pure terror. Colossal 3,200-pound armor-piercing shells, each weighing as much as a small car, began to arc through the sky toward their fragile ships. The Japanese, to aid their range finding, had loaded their shells with colored dye. As the enormous projectiles slammed into the ocean, they sent up towering geysers of water, dyed in garish shades of pink and green, making it seem as if the sea itself was erupting in a violent, unnatural bloom. This was the terrifying culmination of Japan's big ships and gigantic guns philosophy made real. On its third salvo, Yamato achieved what is arguably the longest-range naval hit in history. A shell from its main battery screamed across 19.65 miles of ocean and exploded just feet underneath the keel of the escort carrier USS White Plains. It was not a direct hit, but the underwater concussion was so violent that it buckled the carrier's hull, tripped her circuit breakers, and knocked out all power for several minutes. The single near miss inflicted such severe damage that the ship could never be fully repaired. It was the first blow of the battle, a stunning demonstration of the terrifying accuracy of Yamato's optical rangefinders and fire control computers, even at such an extreme distance. The psychological shock that ran through the American fleet was profound. They were being engaged with deadly precision by an enemy that was still a speck on the horizon. The hunt had begun. As the American ships scattered, laying smoke and dodging into rain squalls, the Yamato and the cruisers of the center force began to systematically target their outmatched prey. This was the moment for which the great battleship had been built, its only true test against surface warships. One of the first to feel its wrath was the destroyer USS Johnston, which under the command of the ferociously brave Ernest E. Evans turned to charge headlong into the Japanese fleet. From a range of 20,300 yards, Yamato trained its guns on the charging tin can and fired. A salvo of 9 18.1-inch shells and 3 6.1-inch shells from its secondary battery slammed into the little destroyer, shattering its bridge, destroying its engine room, and severing a mast. The single devastating volley effectively neutralized the lead American destroyer, leaving it crippled and burning. Next, Yamato turned its attention to the escort carriers. In concert with the heavy cruisers Chikuma and Haguro, it focused fire on the USS Gambier Bay. The carrier, unable to outrun the faster Japanese ships, was bracketed by shells. Hits from Yamato's main guns tore through the unarmored vessel, and a fatal waterline hit flooded her engine room, cutting her speed to a crawl. Listing heavily and on fire, the Gambier Bay capsized and sank, becoming the only American aircraft carrier in history to be destroyed by naval gunfire, a direct result of Yamato's overwhelming assault. The battleship's secondary guns also contributed to the destruction of another American destroyer, the USS Hoel. Already battered by cruiser fire, the Hoel was struck by a 6.1-inch shell from Yamato that disabled her last functioning boiler, leaving her dead in the water before she was finished off. In the midst of this slaughter, however, the surviving destroyers launched a desperate, suicidal torpedo attack. Lookouts aboard Yamato spotted the telltale wakes of multiple torpedoes streaking through the water. To save his flagship, Admiral Kurita ordered a hard turn to port, steaming north and away from the battle. For nearly 10 critical minutes, the most powerful warship in the world was running from the fight, its guns silent. The torpedo evasion saved the Yamato, but it cost the Japanese the battle. The sharp turn threw the already disorganized Japanese formation into further chaos. Admiral Kurita, aboard the bridge of his flagship, was now steaming away from the action, his situational awareness completely lost. Compounding his confusion were the relentless, though largely ineffective air attacks launched by the handful of planes from Taffy 3's carriers and the suicidal charges of the remaining destroyers, which gave the impression of a much larger, more coordinated defense. Kurita, still convinced he was facing Halsey's main Third Fleet, and now fearing that the rest of the Third Fleet was closing in to trap him, made a decision that has baffled historians ever since. At 9:20, with the remnants of Taffy 3 at his mercy and the path to the vulnerable American landing transports wide open, he ordered a general withdrawal. The Yamato, the ultimate weapon of naval warfare, had performed its designed role with brutal efficiency. It had engaged and destroyed enemy warships with overwhelming firepower, achieving a tactical victory of stunning proportions. Yet its commander, standing on its very bridge, had snatched a strategic defeat from the jaws of that victory. The battleship turned and steamed back through the San Bernardino Strait, leaving behind the ghost of an impossible triumph. This paradox of a perfect weapon achieving its purpose within a battle that was ultimately lost would come to define the entire tragic story of the ship itself.